Shalom Shlomo, do you know if Shalom Shlomo, do you know if we're on for today?
I don't know. I'm hoping that we are. I was on
Oh,
yesterday. I was on yesterday as well, and nobody was there.
okay. I just heard from the Rebbe. The Rebbe will be on in 2 minutes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. I mean, that gives me enough time to get my learning background instead of my work background.
Rabbi Shlomo.
Alaikum, Rebbe. How are you?
Okay, Baruch Shem Gewaldig.
Shalom Rebbe.
A couple.
It's good to be back. Been a little bit busy, but glad I could make it today.
Yeah. Me too. All right. It's fascinating. I had to, because of the way the pages were mixed up, I had to go back to the original. I have the original print of the Torah Berekas, which is doesn't help too much. Other that the print is clear because it was typeset. I mean, it was print. It was printed, not just photocopied. So everything is much more clear than the copy of it, which is very often I have to try and figure out what was blurred in the photocopy. So, but we're learning Hilchos Chanukah. We got to the halacha. We got to the introduction to Hilchos Chanukah, and the Tzarich Lizar B'nei Chanukah. I read Afil Anim Espresman Stoker Shoyel and Mocher Ksusa V'Lekech B'Madlik. Right. We talked about the Indian of the shaman of Chanukah comes from Bnei Yitzhar, which are Moshe and Aaron, who are representing Yitzhar is oil. And so these are Bnei Yitzhar. These are the two that received the Mashiach b'Shaman HaKodesh was Moshe and Aaron. So therefore, the whole premise of Chanukah and the shaman, the need for the shaman, brings us back to Keser Kun and Keser Torah. And we talked about the Kohanim and their avodah, but the Chashmonaim who took over their avodah of Aaron HaKohen that was promised to him at Chanukah Samishkan. And therefore, the nes had to happen through the Chashmonaim because that was the way in with which the Avtacha to Aaron HaKohen was given, that he would have his chelik in the Melechas, in the Mishkan, in the Beis HaMikdash, would last for all the history of Klal Yisrael, all the way to Zman Moshe Mashiach. That's where therefore the ani, the poor person, which represents the tzaddik in this world, because the tzaddik is an ani of Olam Haza, in order to be able to have Olam Haba. So whatever his attachments are to this world is not as important as the ner, as the or that comes from ner Chanukah, because that's really dikkur. That's the or. That's the pure or that brings us back to the daris of Aaron HaKohen in the Mishkan. The nerve of the menorah. I just wanted to. There's a beautiful piece of Torah in the Kedushas Tzion on Parshat Baloischa. It's worth it's a barichus because the Malachim had a tiny to Moshe. The Moshe Rabbeinu says that Hashem said he's giving the Torah to Moshe. So the Malachim told the Moshe, you have to know they're going to change it. Moshe already started changing it because in Ma'aser Bereishis, for all of the other 9 memorim of Ma'aser Bereishis, it says V'yam Elokim Yar. All the rest of it says Vayhi came, but not by Ar. There it says V'yam Elokim Yar, Vayhi Ar. And it was light. So Rashi and the Chazal bring this as the reason why Moshe Rabbeinu changed it because he saw that the R of Sheshim Bereishis, the light of this of Brias Olam, was Mahalach Musafat Seifa, and it would fall into the hands of Rishonim, and the Rishonim would be able to misuse it. So therefore, Halach V'Gonzoi. Therefore, he went ahead and he hid the R. Hashem hid the R of Ma'aser Bereishis of the first day of creation, because it could be misused. So the Malachim came as a bunch of Moshe changed it. It should have said Vayichein. The verse says no. Moshe did right because it couldn't be Vayichein. It couldn't be the way it was supposed to be because it had to be the bunch had to hide the So that was hidden, and the Baal Shem said, where is it hidden? It's hidden in the Torah. It's hidden in the Oishas of the Torah. So the Baba Zayda says, he brings from his father, this piece of Torah, Shlomo Baba, the first Baba Rav, and he says, that's Pshan Bar Loisra, Yas Kain Aaron. Yas Kain Aaron. Aaron knew the real reason why Hashem hid the of Sheshim Bereishis. Why he didn't say Vayichein. Vayas Kain Aaron. Aaron knew how to bring the light of Sheshim Bereishis of the sixth day of creation into the halachas and eres, so that the of the Sheshim of the menorah is the of Sheshim Bereishis of the first day, the Vehi of the first day of creation. Let me change this because the light is the light is getting in the way. Okay. That's a beautiful piece of Torah. It goes to the Arichas, the dialogue with the Malachim, etc. But one thing that we come out of it, we see that the light of the menorah is not just that the Anes took place. It took place to bring into this world a light that could only be brought with Mesiras Nefesh, like Aaron HaKohen, and that of the Chashmonaim who lifted up the banner of Klal Yisrael to battle against the Yavanim, to battle against Yavan. And Yavan represents the Arla, represents everything that they want to block it. That's why they were against Bris Milah and Rosh Chodesh and Torah, because those are the things which bring the Ar into the world. And therefore, the Nes had to go through, Bnei Aaron had to come to the descendants of Aaron. And therefore, Chanukah is the opportunity to bring the Ar, that which are not just the light of the menorah, but the Ar of Sheshim Bereishis. So then the Torah Berekes, which mentions this in, because he doesn't, that whole piece of Torah, I'm just adding on because he just touches upon it. The concept of that the Ar of the menorah is the Ar of Sheshim Bereishis. Is he asked the question, why 8 days? Why not 7 days? Why not 10 days? For the same nes that the Kodesh Baruch Hu did for 8 days, he could have done for 10 days. If the nes only took place for 8 days, there had to be a reason for it. So the Stam of the world gives an answer because that's how many days it would take to produce oil. But Tahara, the way that they had to produce the oil for the menorah would take 8 days. He says, so they could have waited. They could have lit for 10 days. They would have a little more oil. They would continue. He says, it sounds good, but it doesn't answer the question. It doesn't answer the question why B'dafka 8 days, unless you say, since you see that what the Yavanim wanted to do was to bring Chesed into the world and to bring the Arla back into the world, they wanted to bring the without which would cover the connection between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Bnei Yisrael. So therefore, the Nes had to be connected Bris Milah. There would have to be 8 days. Right? It had to be on the 8 days in order so that it would show the world that we had fought against the Arla of Yavan, the obstacle with Arla, the Tuma of Greek thought and beliefs, to be able to see that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light is there and was brought and uncovered, and therefore the 8 days was not only just simply because it would take the oil to produce oil, because it had to bring back the Ar of the Bris Milah back into Klal Yisrael. That was tremendous, beautiful insight. So I wanted to add to, it's a nice geschmack, long piece, which is, one of these days we'll sit down and learn it in depth. for us to recognize that which was given to Klal Yisrael is not just that we were given Chachmas HaTorah. That's no question about it. The Torah is the source of wisdom that makes us recognize the world knows that Klal Yisrael has a unique wisdom, and they constantly berate us for be able to think differently and do things differently than they want us to do. We live differently than they do. We practice differently. We do everything differently. We even resent their interference differently than the nations of the world. Is because Klal Yisrael carries with us, a unique relationship between HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ish v'Isha, represents, as we say, Eshes Chayil Me'yimtza every Friday night, is referring to Shabbos and Klal Yisrael and Rebbeinu Shalom. Right? Ish Yeres Hashem Hitasal is referring to the Kedusha of Klal Yisrael and Shabbos, and the connection that we are able to make when we bring in the Kedusha of Shabbos into Klal Yisrael, which Shabbos is also called Ois Bris. The Shabbos is Ois. That's the Ois Bris of Shabbos. Shabbos is called the Bris between Hashem and Bnei Yisrael. That this Reb was the ability to overcome that, to overcome the Orla, goes back. He says he brings the Medrash by David HaMelech. David HaMelech, when he went to fight Yebusim, which were the Canaanim, they were surrounded by a big chayma. So he asked, who's ready to try and scale the walls? He says, it's Yoav. Yoav said, I will try. So he jumped on David HaMelech's shoulders, and he grabbed hold of a tree, and the tree was able to project it, so he could follow over the wall, and therefore he would be inside to let in the troops into the fortress of Yevusim. But then it says that the Medrash goes on and says when David wanted to jump in, so the wall sank down, so David HaMelech could jump over. David HaMelech didn't need to grab hold of a tree which would allow him to spring over the walls of the Yevusim. He says, because Yevusim and Canaanim represent also the Orla. He says they represent the preoccupation with the Orla Magashmi in a way that the Taivas of the world was embedded within the Canaanim. And that's the reason why Klal Yisrael had to purify Klal Yisrael from all Shiva Umas of Canaanim, because it wasn't just that they were sitting on our land, and we learned it from this parsha, the Shem, Malki Tzedek Melech Shalom came, that he was from Yerushalayim, he came to, hello, Shalom Ezra, and I see Baruch there also, that it was that the ability to be able to bring Kedusha into Klal Yisrael is represented by David HaMelech, and David, they would need to eradicate the Shiva Umas of Canaan, was because they represented everything that's the opposite of what Klal Yisrael stood for. The tomb of the Canaanim, right, is that the Torah warns us, this is a thorn in our side. When we allow the corruption, the distortion of the preoccupation with the Olam Hazeh to block our ability to see that we're the Ani. We're the Ani that knows that this world is not what we need to be holding on to. It's not our priority to be able to be comfortable in this world. Our priority is to be able to shed the comfort of this world. And when we try and be comfortable in this world, the nations of the world tell us, no, your role is to be an Ani. And they continuously reinforce that sinner that they have to the Kedusha of Torah in our world. The Ner Chanukah, and what David HaMelech was able to accomplish, was that he showed that the Kadosh Baruch Hu wants us to break down the walls of the tomb of Canaan. And we're living in a world in with which so much of the preoccupation with how to manage our comfort level in our world today is a preoccupation with the world of Canaan, with the world of Esav. And that's why he says by David HaMelech, the Gemara tells us David HaMelech was in the Beis HaMerchatz, and he saw that he was completely naked, and he felt, he says, he was empty of all mitzvahs, and then he realized that there's the Bris Milah. Then the Bris Milah, he was comforted that he still had the Eis Bris that would always be with him no matter where he was. And it's, and the Chazal, the Mefarshim and the Baal Musar bring many different pieces of insight into that Gemara. The David HaMelech taught Bnei Yisrael that kedusha which lies within the Eis Bris is the kedusha which allows Klal Yisrael to withstand all and conquer all of the obstacles that comprise of the material world and its indulgences. And that's why the Gemara itself says, "Ashari b'lo isha, ashari b'lo chayma." It's an interesting phrase. That whoever is without a wife is as if they have no wall to protect them. Shenema nekeva t'shev gever v'ranan, which was sadik possible, right? That's why David HaMelech says, when in order to catapult Yoav Nechas B'Rosh Ranon, when the Rosh is able to bring the kedusha, you have to overcome the wall, and then the wall becomes smaller. It becomes something that we can penetrate, we can cast it, we can overcome. In our world, seems like the walls are so tall, are so strong. And we keep on throwing ourselves against those walls. We say, no, come on, we're going to break down the walls that are preventing us from being comfortable in this world. You got it wrong. They're not paying attention to the wall. The wall is not a wall of something for which we break down by throwing ourselves and trying to, as I would say, klappen Wand, trying to break down the wall by banging our head against it. We need to be mechazik, and as there's been many drushes in these last several months, that our avodah is to be able to spring over the wall, to be able to be higher than the wall, to be at a higher madrega than we were before. Such was the matana that HaKadosh Baruch Hu put into the world when the first of the steps of Ma'aser Bereishis is Vayam Elokim Yehi Or. Right? That's the first of the creations. Ain't Bereishis now remind me, but still, Vayam Elokim, the first utterance that HaKadosh Baruch Hu revealed to us was Or. By He Or, there is the Or, if we go looking for the Or. Otherwise, we're looking for how to be Isaac with Cheshach. We're not so good at that, and our nations, the nation, the world around us, are much better at putting up the obstacles of darkness than we are in dispelling their darkness. Because the darkness that they have that exists there is only because we haven't brought the Or of Torah, the Or of Sheshim Mebreshus into this world. He says, and that's the godless of Ner Chanukah. Ner Chanukah was the ability of the Chashmonaim to bring the Or of Aaron HaKohen, as we said before, Vayaske and Aaron did the Cain. He did the way that the intention was for the Rebbe when he wanted to create the Or of Sheshim Mebreshus. An Or that would Hoylach Meseifa at Seifai. There's no obstacles that can prevent the Or of Sheshes Meibreishis from penetrating. Only what? The Baruch Shem was guiding it. He guides it so that we should be able to discover at each one of the generations that we need that Or of Torah, that we should be able to overcome it. And Yitzchak Soskin mentioned yesterday in his talk on behalf of Agudas Yisrael was that we are allowing ourselves not to be lifting ourselves up so that all of Klal Yisrael will have its connection to the Or of Torah. And so the place, as it says, is to tell us that the walls of our homes, the place where we build Kedusha, begins with the walls of our homes. And how we bring the Kedusha in the walls of our homes is really that which makes it possible for us to combat that darkness. And maybe just because the nature of politics, that the political system wants to battle with politics, wants to prove that they're right politically. I don't see that that's the Nesochen. That leads us to the Nesochen, not only leads us to more controversy. And it's really the rising above the politics, rising above the darkness of our world around us, to say that our world needs more Torah, to be able to reach out to those who don't have Torah, to those who need the Torah, to those for whom are thirsting for the light and Torah, is really what will possible for us to overcome this without having to go through another period of darkness, of intense darkness. And he would say, one of the things that he said was, he says, if we take a look at what was happening in European history between World War I and World War II, was a tremendous amount of cheshech, the cheshech of socialism and rationalism and communism, all the isms, as the Chafetz Chaim used to call them, all these avodah zaras of the post-World War I, the postmodern era. And it was not sustainable. Torah was almost not being sustained before World War II. The churban that was taking place in the homes of Klal Yisrael was intense. I think I mentioned it before. When we were living in Denver, there was some of the older shachtim. One of them was Reb Chaim Jasler. Reb Chaim Jasler was a Rad and a Talmud, the Talmud of Chafetz Chaim. We were once sitting on Sunday morning after davening, and he says, listen, Gleimir, he says, believe me, he says, I lived with you, I grew up between World War I and World War II. He says, I was in Radin. He says, and the battle between the Torah world and the Haskalah was not just an intellectual battle, it became a physical battle. He says, I'm telling you that if it wouldn't have been for Hitler, Yamach Shema, who came to spill Jewish blood, we would have been spilling Jewish blood in the streets of Europe. That's how intense the battle was. This was his perspective. And it's been corroborated. He talked to and look at history and what was happening. The battle for Torah before World War II was awesome. That we see today, Torah blossoming, is far, far beyond what could have been ever imagined in the world in Europe before World War II. So we have the koach, of Torah, and we see that that's really what the Ummah Ha'olam are trying to stop us. They're trying to stop us from learning Torah. They want to shut down the yeshivas, about the knesses, about the madrashas. You see that their battle is with Torah. And somebody once showed me, though, some would question the credibility of a letter from Goebbels, the propagandist for the Nazis, Yamach Shemam, where he said, our battle is not with the Jewish people, our battle is with what they believe in. Our battle is with Torah. And the reason why we have to destroy the Jews is because as long as there's a Jew standing, Torah will always regenerate itself. No. They know that. They know that better than we do. They know that they have to battle against the light of Torah. Chanukah is the resurgence of the light of Torah. So we should prepare ourselves as we're talking about the light. It says that's why the 8 days of Chanukah are there connected the darkness of the Orla, and the 8 days prove that we are capable of overcoming it. How do we overcome it? You don't go out with a battle of 8 lights at one night. One light, second night 2 lights, second night 3 lights, 4 lights. We keep on adding more one step at a time. One step at a time until we get to the point that we are able to dispel the darkness. B'yayim hashmini. Right? So that's one of the things that the Torah says. You see that even though the nes took place in 8 days, we don't light 8 lech the first night. Even though it's b'sham, it does, but it's parchas v'haylech. It says because if you're paying attention to the spiritual light, you need less light. You need more ruchnius light. But that's the way they answer b'shamai. But nevertheless, we see that the derech that we have is every night we add a little bit more, light, bring a little bit more light into our world. But that we take these neir and neiros Chanukah. That's what it says. The halacha says, kama neiros madlik. How do I do it? Shulchan Aruch says, b'lai rishon madlik or echad can be ilach ma'asav ha'ilach. Every day of Chanukah, every day of our lives, we're constantly being ma'asav ha'ilach on the light that comes from our Sheshim Ebreshis. That the light, by the time we get to Chanukah, the light will be so strong that they'll dispel the entire darkness of Golus. To be able to see the light of the menorah and the Beis Hamikdash from here. Everybody have a wonderful day, and Bez Hashem will continue tomorrow.
Amen. Have a good day, Rabbi. Yeshkoyach.
Take care. It's the Science Rabbi. Have a great day.